What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coast to Coast Sports. I am David Street, and if you missed our last episode, my co-host Matty Ice will not be with us for a little while because he is on his honeymoon with his lovely wife. So instead, we got Texas Ed here, who is graciously filling in for him.
How do you do, everybody? Hook 'em.
All right, so we didn't have a show Monday because we just weren't able to. So might be a little late, but we're gonna go over some games that happened. So I'm gonna talk about the Florida South Carolina game here. So big road victory for us, especially because beforehand we had only one um, true road game under Billy Napier at Texas A&M last year. But let's go over some information here. So Saturday, Graham Mertz passed for 423 passing yards, and I believe it was the first time that he ever threw for at least 400 yards in his collegiate career, if I am correct on that. He had 3 touchdowns, 0 picks on 30 of 48 passing. He completed the his lowest percentage of passes as a Gator, but honestly, who gives a crap when he was just like he just balled out. Ricky Pearsall had 166 receiving yards on 10 receptions and the game-winning touchdown grab, and then other players as well. Tight end Arla Sportingham had a key 4th and 11 conversion with just over 7 minutes left in the game, and was also able to haul in an overthrown ball by Mertz for a touchdown. And then, so here's something interesting. So Boardingham, his first 4 games, had only 51 receiving yards and just 1 touchdown. But in his last 2 games combined, he's had 154 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. So the tight end, so the he's getting more involved in the passing game lately. And Trey Wilson had a huge reception after the ball was tipped off of Pearsall's hands. If you remember that, if you watched the game, Mertz targeted Pearsall and it bounced off Pearsall's hands. And at that moment, I'm sure every Gator fan like me was going, "Oh no!" But then Trey Wilson, who's a true freshman, by the way, and just makes magic happen every time he gets the ball. So he was the hero there. And then the defense, which I have praised constantly on the show, has unfortunately regressed some, and it was very, very bad in Saturday's game. But they did come up huge in the end when it mattered the most. So kudos to them. So more notes. We're 5-2, which I don't think anybody was expecting heading into the season. And it's funny because there have been times where we've looked like hot garbage, and you can tell that we are far from a finished product. But 5-2 is 5-2. The team grew up. That was a grown up win that you saw on Saturday. I'm telling you that kind of win does not happen last year or the year before that, to be frank. And then here's something interesting. So the following that I'm about to say, I have no definite proof of. In fact, what I'm about to say, I got from a podcast called High Top Sports, which Gator fans, you should check out High Top Sports. Shelton, the main guy, does phenomenal work there, and this is all just speculation from his part. So everything that you're about to hear is just all hearsay. Okay. But apparently, from what we understand, Billy wasn't calling all of the plays. And in fact, some of the plays were being called by our tight ends coach, Russ Callaway. So I imagine the passing plays that involved Boardingham were probably called by Callaway. Now, if this is true, and again, we don't know if it's not, this is just pure speculation here. So don't think this is anything else, okay? But if this is true, then this is an absolutely great thing. Not for the obvious reason of, oh, Billy's not that great as a play caller. No, it's not that. I say that this is a great thing because to me, it tells me that Billy has enough humility to swallow his pride and put his ego away for the betterment of the team, right? Because I think Billy is doing so many things right, okay? He's obviously a great recruiter, as evidenced by our number three, I believe it's number three, recruiting class for 2024 per 24/7 Sports. He's a great developer. Prime example of that is Osiris Torrance. Lost my train of thought there. Osiris Torrance, who wasn't very highly recruited coming out of high school. In fact, he was a very lowly either 2-star or 3-star, but he wasn't highly recruited. And he spent his first couple or few seasons at Louisiana with Billy, and then transferred over to Florida. And now he's with the Bills as one of the best rookie offensive guards in the NFL. Billy's talent evaluation, I don't think, can be put into question, especially with how Graham Mertz has been performing. Like, nothing else needs to be said there. But I have said before that Billy's weakness is in play calling. I don't think he's a bad play caller because I've seen him make some great play calls. I think he's an inconsistent play caller. But yeah, like I said, from what I understand and from what I'm hearing, and I don't have any hardcore evidence to back this up. He wasn't calling all the plays, and if that's true, then like I said, I think that shows that he has been putting his ego aside for the betterment of the team. And then last point I'll make about this for now is that we're actually seeing Graham Mertz throw the deep ball more. I think he threw more deep balls in the South Carolina game than he did in all the other games combined. And it's interesting because I'm talking about how, well, not just me, but going into the season, Florida fans talked about how all Graham Mertz needs to do is manage the game well. And for the first like 4 or 5 games, that's exactly what Graham Mertz did. He was being a very efficient game manager. Well, now in his last couple of games, we're actually seeing the playbook open up more, and now we're actually seeing Graham Mertz throw more deep balls. And I talk about before how we're a run first team. Well, now it's like, okay, well, now we know that Graham Mertz has the ability to actually extend the field. So are we actually going to convert into a pass first team? I don't know, but I am very excited and very encouraged by what I've been seeing from Graham Mertz. And also, it can't be a coincidence that we're actually seeing him throw the deep ball more after the old head ball coach, Steve Spurrier, talked about wanting to see Mertz throw the deep ball more. So those are all of my thoughts for now, Ed. What do you got for me?
Well, I wanted to ask real quick, what do you think needs to be worked on in that locker room going into the bye week? Is it recovery from the first half of the season? Is there a specific ideological sense that needs to be tweaked during this bye week? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things, but if I had to if I had to point to like one thing that really needs to be fixed, I would say it would have to be our rushing defense, because South Carolina, at least going into the Florida game, had the worst rushing attack in the SEC, or at least they had one of the worst rushing attacks in the SEC, and they completely carved us up. That is unacceptable. If South Carolina does that to us, imagine what Georgia is going to do to us. Now, the good news is that we have a bye week here, so we have some time off. So Austin Armstrong is going to get plenty of time to shore that unit up. But like I said, man, you can't allow a team like South Carolina, who going into the game, terrible rushing attack, go off against us like that. That can't happen. So I would say that our rushing attack, or excuse me, our rushing defense is what we need to work on. And really, our defense as a whole needs work, because it has looked very leaky the last few games.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Uh, there is a game that I wanted to follow up on from last week that I had previewed since Texas was on a bye week, and that is the game between Wyoming and Air Force. Now, this was a game that kind of played out the way that I had expected it to. Wyoming actually came out to a 2-touchdown lead in the first quarter. Air Force counterpunched, and they wound up going into halftime at 21-17 Wyoming. Well, in the second half, Air Force really flipped the script and controlled the game throughout most of the rest of it. Uh, in fact, getting up to a 27-21 lead before Zach Larrier got injured, their Air Force's starting quarterback, who had already had a fairly decent game, going 6 for 9 for 53 for 58 yards, uh, and had scored a touchdown during that game. The interesting part, the wild part of it, came after he was knocked out. Wyoming had scored, and it was 27-all with an extra point to come. Air Force actually blocked that kick uh, to keep it as a tie game. And then on the next drive, Air Force got another explosive run from Eldridge III for, I believe it was 68 yards for a game-sealing victory of 34-27. This was one of the more exciting games I saw over the weekend outside of the state of Washington, because I know we all kind of watched that one with bated breath with everything going on there. But I really thought this game was going to fly under the radar, and it did. But it was certainly a good football game to watch. So for all those that saw it, I'm glad you were treated to it. For those that missed it, I apologize, but I wouldn't overlook the G5 schedule when looking for good football games to watch, because there were some horrendous football games in the nightcap of last weekend, and this was one of the diamonds in the rough for that time slot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anybody who's been paying attention to the college football season knows that Air Force easily has the best chance of all the G5 teams to make a New Year's bowl. Now Ed, I have a question here, and you might not have the answer here, and that's fine. But I actually am curious. When's the last time a military school made a New Year's Six bowl? Like, have Navy or Army ever made one, or would Air Force be the first ever military school to make a New Year's Six bowl? Because I, for the life of me, cannot remember the last time that even happened.
From my recollection, Air Force in 02 got close to being in a higher level bowl, but did not quite make it. So ever since the change to the BCS format, there has not been a military academy make it to those higher level bowls, although there are several bowl games that have featured Air Force and Navy and Army, because they have become cyclical as to who's more dominant over that time period. I've seen Army get 9 wins. I've seen Navy get double-digit wins. Air Force has been by far the most consistent of the military academies. In fact, since their coach got there, I believe they have made a bowl game every year except his first, just getting into the new style and the recruiting that is required for Air Force to get those people on the field.
Right. Okay. Very good. And lastly, I wanted to ask you real quick about Washington, Oregon before we move on to our other topic. So, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see the Washington, Oregon game. I really wanted to, but the Florida, South Carolina game was on at about the same time. So, yeah. So I'm only going off of what I've read, the box score and whatnot. And what I've read is that everybody was grilling Dan Lanning for being too aggressive, which is so weird because in this day and age, you're so used to seeing a coach get criticized when he's not aggressive. Well, Dan Lanning was aggressive, but he was getting grilled for it. And, at the risk of sounding ignorant here, I'm a little confused because I thought that Dan Lanning was a defensive coach. And I thought that, I don't remember Oregon's offensive coordinator's name, but whoever he is, I would have thought that he made all those calls. So, and sure, you might say, well, Dan Lanning is the head coach, so it falls on him. And yeah, there's some truth to that. But if Dan Lanning is a defensive guy and doesn't call plays on offense, if I'm correct, then why is he getting all the blame here? Like, why is he getting all the flack?
Well, there were several instances within that game that a traditional coach would take points, such as a field goal. Uh, at the end of the half, Oregon had a chance to kick a field goal and go into the locker room with 3 extra points. They decided to go for it and try and score a touchdown on a rollout pass that really did not look like a good play whatsoever from the get go. So that's 3 points off the board. Guess how many points Oregon lost by? 3. There was another instance that Oregon bypassed a field goal to try and be aggressive, and they didn't quite get those points on that drive, which they could have had another 3. Guess how many points Oregon lost by? 3. And then you get one of the more consistent kickers that I don't know if he felt like he wasn't being trusted enough. At the end of the game, he could have tied it, and they could have gone to overtime, and he misses it wide right. I don't know if that's a psychological thing for a kicker, just not having the obvious chances that should have been there for him get passed up. But in the end, Oregon loses by 3. They took 6 points off the board and the chance to get 14, which by metrics and all these analytics, they're saying you should go for it all the time, every time. Well, in a way, I get it, because you're putting your team in a position to win, and that's the coach's job, is to put his team in a position to win. However, I think it was recklessly aggressive, and I think that is the more criticizing thing for Dan Lanning in that game, is being recklessly aggressive as opposed to being aggressive for a positive spin, not for just the sake of being aggressive.
Do you think, and the last point I'll make before we move on, do you think that Lanning actually made those calls, or do you think he's just taking the fall because he's the head coach?
It doesn't matter. He is the head coach, so he is, the buck stops with him. Whether it's his coordinators, whether it's his other position coaches, whether it's the players trust the coaching staff to make the call for them. They are there to execute the plan of the coaches. So it doesn't matter who made the call. Dan Lanning, he is the head of the organization. He is the face of that organization. He has got to take the blame, and to his credit, he has.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Okay, moving on. So, something that I want to talk about, Ed, are just some surprises of the season, like, whether good or bad, and it can be like a player surprise or a team surprise, whatever. And I'll go first. So, as a Florida fan, I know what you're probably expecting me to say, and I'm actually not going to go there, because I think I've said it enough, and I don't even need to say what it is for you to know what I'm talking about. But Ed, for my big surprise this season, I'm going to have to go with North Carolina's defense, because as we all remember, North Carolina last year was absolutely atrocious, in all caps, atrocious on defense. And in fact, their first 6 games last year, Ed, they were giving up 465 yards per game and 32 points per game. Well, this year, the first 6 games this year, it is truly shocking how much North Carolina's defense has improved, because this year so far through 6 games, they're giving up 360 yards per game, and they're giving up just 21 points per game. Their defense has not been elite by any stretch of the imagination, but it has been very good, and it has been so much better than last year. Like, North Carolina, Ed, is a legit playoff team. Like, they are a legit playoff contending team, not just because of the offense, which has been excellent, but because of how improved the defense has been. So, shout out to North Carolina there. And if I'm correct, I don't think they changed their defensive coordinators. I'm pretty sure Gene Chizik is still there. And so, listen, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to North Carolina last year, because I'm not a North Carolina fan, so I don't know what it was last year. Like, I don't know if North Carolina had a lot of key injuries. I don't know if maybe Gene Chizik changed up his scheme this year. I don't know what it was, but the fact that he, that he's still there and under his watch this year, he's overlooking a much, much, much more improved unit. Kudos to him, and really kudos to the whole UNC defense. What about you? What's been your biggest or one of your big surprises this year?
Well, to follow up on your point there, you're talking to a Texas fan that about a Mac Brown coach team with Gene Chizik as the defensive coordinator.
Okay,
Where
I
have I
walked into
seen
that
that
one.
before?
I definitely walked into that one.
Uh, One of the big surprises that I would say, and I'll make 2 points if I could.
Go ahead.
One is just how horrible the expansion Big 12 teams have been coming into the league. It has truly been shocking how little success that they've had so far in the first half of this season. I mean, so far you've had a total of 2 wins out of the 4 teams coming into the league in conference play, of course, uh, with a total of uh, 10 games being played. That's a 200 winning percentage for a for 4 teams that were brought into the Big 12 to up its profile. You're not going to be able to up its profile if you do not win, if you do not become competitive right out the get go. I mean, right now, you've got Oklahoma, you've got Texas, and nobody else is in the top 25. Kansas just got beat by Oklahoma State, which lost to Iowa State. I went into the season thinking Iowa State was going to be the worst team in the league. Well, here they are at 3-1 in conference play, and I couldn't be more wrong on that account. They've gutted out some wins once they got into conference play. Now the back half of their schedule is going to be a little tougher, but that just kind of proves the point. Iowa State's been able to step in. They're actually number 2 in the league by virtue of playing more games in leagues than what Texas has so far. So I just thought it was a major disappointment so far in the first half of the season to have these expansion teams not fare well at all coming into the league. Now, the second point I wanted to make is I love college football, and I love the fact that it is so even across the top teams in the nation. The top 12, let's think about this for a second. The top 12 teams all have a path to the college football playoff right now. That is nuts. We have not seen that since the playoff became a thing. You know, in the BCS, there was maybe 2-3 teams that truly had a path. You know, in the college football playoff, we've had as much as, maybe 5 or 6 teams have a path this far deep in the season. In this last season of 4 college football playoff slots, we have 12 teams that have a path to get into those 4 slots. That is nuts, and I am here for it. We have got to see what the rest of this season brings. We are going to have some cannibalization, just as this week we're going to have Ohio State play at Penn State. We're going to have the game with Michigan and Ohio State. We're going to have, what I think is going to be a revenge rematch game with Oklahoma and Texas. We're going to have another rematch game, in my opinion, of Oregon and Washington. These are going to be great games to just solidify who needs to be up there. But here we are. We're at October, middle of October, and we still have a dozen teams still vying and still actually have a path to get to those 4 slots. And I'm here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll add one more surprise for me. The Arizona Wildcats, Ed, they've been a really good football team this year. They're only, quote unquote, only 4-3. But first of all, let's talk about their game on Saturday just real quick. They smashed 19th ranked Washington State 44-6 at Washington State, by the way. and they did it on the strength of 5 rushing touchdowns. Like I said, the Wildcats have been so much better than their record indicates. Their 3 losses have only been by a combined 16 points, and all but one of their wins have been blowouts. So Jed Fish is building a really good program up there in Pullman. Now, I will say that the rest of Arizona's schedule is not easy at all. And in fact, I'm looking at their schedule here right now, and they've got Oregon State, UCLA, at Colorado, Utah, and at Arizona State. So unfortunately for Arizona there, I am only looking at 2 winnable games there, and that's at Colorado and at Arizona State. So it is very possible that Arizona could possibly finish 6-6 or maybe even 5-7. This is not a knock on them, but this just more so says about how tough the rest of their schedule is. But even so, don't let that take away the fact that they have been a pleasant surprise this season. And I think it kind of reminds me of Oregon State under Jonathan Smith when they were slowly but surely building a contender. And now look at Oregon State. Now they're one of the best teams in the country, and they're like either 12th or 13th in the AP poll. But did you have any thoughts on Arizona before we move on?
I did. And it's fun that you brought up Arizona building because remember, next year they go into the Big 12 as one of the replacement teams for Texas and Oklahoma. You've got Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, all going to the Big 12 at the same time. So 8 new teams in 2 years into the Big 12. Although I think with the power vacuum that Oklahoma and Texas are going to provide, you're going to see those Pac-12 teams. If watch out, they are going to be the ones that take over the Big 12 faster than any of these these G5 teams that got promoted this year take over that power vacuum, along with whoever's left, like Kansas State or even TCU, Texas Tech. As Joey McGuire said, the Big 12 runs through Lubbock. It will eventually, but it's not this year. It's going to be tougher to get those recruits out in the desert to come to Lubbock when you have Arizona and Arizona State in the same conference, going head to head. So I'm very much looking forward to how that shakes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, normally to our audience who's watching this, we don't usually do game previews this early, but we're changing things up, just for this week, and then we'll see what happens there. But Ed, Texas had a bye week last week, but now you guys are actually playing this Saturday. So without further ado, if you could go ahead and just tell us what we should expect for the Texas game. Who are you guys playing? What should we expect to see?
Sure. Texas will be playing Houston this week at TDECU Stadium in Houston. This is going to be a 3:00 kickoff Central Time, if I remember correctly. And Houston just came off of that very emotional Thursday night win against West Virginia. They did Texas a favor in the standings. We talked about that last week. But coming out of the bye week, there were some really interesting points that our coach Steve Sarkisian made about self-scouting through the first half of the season that we will be able to implement starting with Houston. And that is the red zone execution. It's been a big bugaboo around here in Austin for the red zone execution of the Longhorns. One of the lower half in the country, but they've had so many explosive plays, it's kind of made up for that. So I think we're going to see more of a grinded out, not still have those explosive plays, but we are going to have a better time executing in the red zone. For that is what we've been working on for the past 2 weeks through the bye. We're going to probably see more action from Savion Red, our Wildcat quarterback, who has really bounced around the program, starting as a high school quarterback, was a wide receiver, then a running back, and as we saw in the Red River Shootout, a Wildcat quarterback. he's going to add some dimension to that package that a lot of teams don't include because he is such a versatile player. Now, on Houston's side, uh, they have Donovan Smith, which we're very familiar with. He was the transfer from Texas Tech. He beat Texas last year while he was in Lubbock. And they've also got a dynamic wide receiver athlete, Matthew Golden, who has 4 receiving touchdowns so far this year and 2 punt return touchdowns this year. So, if we're not sound in all 3 phases of the game, we will be challenged. Now, I say challenge, I'm still saying that Texas is going to handle their business. But right now, I believe we're in the part of the season, even though Tim Brando has told me specifically that the entire season you need to worry about style points, style points. Well, now's the time to really kick it into gear. These style points are going to make a difference for these playoff committees as they are trying to select one team over another. And if Texas and Alabama have the same one-loss record, and it's the choice between two, which one looks more impressive, the one with more style points or not, they're probably going to go with Alabama. So Texas really needs to make sure that we are taking care of our business on the lighter half of our schedule. So far this year, we have the second hardest schedule in the nation, and we came out of it 5-1. We have a little bit lighter back end. We should be rolling these guys, in my opinion, so we can really get our name in front of these voters that are making the decisions as we get further down the line. So when and if we do get Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game, it will be for a playoff spot. It won't be for that 5th spot that is the big dog and the Power 5 that's left out with all these other big games going on. But back to the game itself, we are going to probably see more of Jonathan Brooks, who's the number 9 rusher in the country at 726 yards. He has more explosive plays from scrimmage, mainly because of the RPO game, the line blocking, which our O-line coach Curt Flood has worked with the entire group this week to be more versatile and not have as many hiccups when our center goes down like he did in the Red River Shootout. So we can continue to play our style of ball instead of having to adjust to that. We're going to have a bit more play action. We're going to have good RPO. The big thing that we really want to work on is downfield blocking by the wide receivers. Let's get Adonai Mitchell down there. Let's get Xavier Worthy down there. Get that consistent down the field blocking to have those explosive plays against a rushing defense for Houston that is giving up already 162 yards a game when we rush for 112, which that's a little bit low, but we are really getting leads and ending the clock. We should be having our foot on the pedal going into this game and the rest of our schedule, and I don't see this being any other way other than Texas winning 48-17. It's going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah, definitely. And then I wanted to ask you something. So would you say that the loss to Oklahoma in a way was a blessing in disguise? Like, obviously it sucks when you lose to your biggest rival. But at the end of the day, you guys control your own destination, and if or when, more than likely when you do meet Oklahoma again in the Big 12 title game, I would argue that you guys have the advantage because it's like, okay, well, our loss to you guys forced us to make adjustments, and now we can actually beat you guys in a game that actually matters much more than a regular season game. But would you say that the loss to Oklahoma was a blessing in disguise for you?
In a way, yes, it was, and not for the starters. I think it was more of a blessing in disguise of the 2s and 3s on the roster to give them a wake-up call on playing more consistently. We have a lot of young guys that are fighting for play time. Well, they're not going to get playtime if they are not playing as consistently as what the starters do. They can have their highlight moments in practice. They can have their highlight moments once in a while in the game, but they have to show that level of consistency to play at the level that we want to be at. And we want to be at that top 5, top 3, number 1 team in the country level. We're not going to be able to do that if we only have the starters be the most consistent players on the team. We've got to have the 2 and 3s buy in and show those habits in practice.
Very good. And well, I don't have a preview for Florida because, well, we're not playing this weekend. Like I said, we are off this weekend. But folks, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Coast to Coast Sports. That's all the time that we have. I'm David Street. That's Texas Ed. Texas Ed, can you tell people where they can find you on Twitter?
Absolutely. You can find me as Texas Ed on Twitter. Ed Smith 7133 if you're looking for the exact at on there, and hook 'em.
Very good. And then as for me, you can find me at David_Street 17. Again, that's David_Street 17. Go Gators, and we'll see you guys next time.